You've worked hard. You've been a good steward. You've saved for years, and retirement is finally within reach. But one wrong investing move now could potentially undo decades of effort and derail your Christian retirement. And that's what I want to unpack today. Hello. If we haven't met before, I'm Planner Mike, certified financial planner professional and owner of True Wealth Financial. This is a show that's dedicated to helping Christians retire with confidence and clarity so that they can finish their race with purpose. Thanks for tuning in. In this episode, I want to share a couple costly investment mistakes that pre-retirees and really a whole bunch of other people make. And more importantly, how you can avoid them. And of course, we'll end with one micro action, hopefully to get you one step closer to a Christian retirement that is prosperous, enjoyable, and purposeful. So let's jump straight in. Big mistake number one, holding too much cash. Now, cash feels safe, but it quietly erodes your financial future. Inflation reduces your purchasing power over time, right? Like right now, I love the idea that you can get 4.5% essentially risk-free, but the challenge is we don't know how long that's going to last. And holding too much cash now could make you miss out on some late stage compounding that's pretty critical to your retirement. Now you might say, well, Mike, I don't need the compounding. Well, let me ask you this. How confident are you in that? All right. So good practice essentially is to hold about 3 to 6 months of cash in an emergency fund. And that's great. If you have some short-term goals coming up in the next year or so, have the cash for those. That's great as well. If you're actively pulling money from your investments, from your 401k, from your IRAs, things like that as kind of a paycheck, maybe you want to have a year, maybe 2 years worth of cash. But beyond that, I'd encourage you to invest wisely the rest based upon your timeline and goals, because inflation's going to catch you from behind, right? We have no idea what money markets are going to do. Consider just the 2010s, right? Throughout the 2010s, bank accounts, money markets, they're paying like essentially zero, while inflation kind of kept quietly at a 1, 2, 3% and then spiked. And eventually then money markets caught up with it, right? So you want to have some cash, but you don't want to have too much cash. Costly mistake number 2 is too much concentration. If people have too much money or too much of their investments or portfolios in one stock or in one sector, it could really sink your retirement because you're too concentrated. We see this a lot of times where people work for a company and they get company stock and company options, or they invest in that company because it feels familiar to them. And so they take that out and they just leave it there for a long time. Well, if something happens to that company or that company's stock or that company overall, it could really be catastrophic for your retirement. And it's not just limited to just one, employer stock. It could be a sector or even a country bias, right? So for example, the United States, we had a bumpy Q1, Q2 in the markets. But meanwhile, international, it's been smoking this year. Now, has it always been? No. But this is the same thing that happened in the 2000s, right? The 2000s to 2010s were referred to as the missing decade. Essentially, the value of the S&P was about the same 10 years later. Meanwhile, international did well. So we have no idea what any one country or any sector or any stock's going to do over the long term. But the idea is if you're too concentrated, you have everything in one spot, you're taking unnecessary risk too close to retirement. Consider this example here of someone who retired in 2000. They had $1 million portfolio. They were taking out $50,000, so they had a 5% withdrawal rate, inflated over time for inflation. We can see that they had portfolio 1. They had a single investment, essentially total U.S. stock market. So everything was U.S. And you can see 17 years later, they essentially ran out of money. Compare that to portfolio number 2 that had a diversified U.S., real estate, international, emerging markets, right? A more global portfolio. The same thing prospered over that time. So again, we have no idea what exactly the future holds. We don't know what kind of market you're going to return into. So the best way to handle that is to have a diversified portfolio across asset classes, against sectors, against geographies, based upon what you're trying to achieve. Costly mistake number 3, ignoring tax diversification. If all your money is in pre-tax accounts, the reality is Uncle Sam is going to get a bigger piece of that pie than you think. Heavy reliance on a 401k or traditional IRA can create huge tax burdens in retirement. Since we did a whole episode on this, talking about the blind spot of retirement in our last episodes. And this is even more so when RMDs or requirement of distribution starts. And if someone passes away, the survivor could be left in what's called the widow's tax trap, right? If you have everything in a tax-deferred account, that's going to limit your flexibility and income planning later on. So the better way to handle that is to have a balanced approach across pre-tax, potentially some after-tax 401k contributions, some Roth accounts, taxable accounts, and that'll give you more control over your retirement income when you start taking money out. Costly investment mistake number 4, underestimating longevity. Retirement isn't a 15-year sprint. It could be more of a 30-year marathon. And because people don't think about the idea of living long, they kind of fall back to some of these, I want more cash. I want to be more conservative. I don't need to diversify as much. And many only plan till they're 80 or so. And thus the risk of running out of money becomes even greater. This is especially critical for healthy, active couples. Social Security Administration has the best data from a U.S. actuarial perspective. And according to their life expectancy timelines, a 65-year-old male today has a life expectancy, an average life expectancy of 84. That means some could live longer, half essentially, and some would not. The same thing for a female. A 65-year-old female today has a life expectancy, according to Social Security Administration, of 87, right? So again, half are younger than that, half is longer than that. But let me ask you this. With science and technology, is life expectancy getting better or is it getting worse? Generally speaking, it's getting better. So the mindset you want to have is to plan for through age of 90 or maybe 95 with increased inflation. And that doesn't even count long-term care events, right? So having a longer longevity perspective as it comes to your investments will greatly help you out. Costly mistake number 5, timing the markets. The reality is the market doesn't care about your retirement timeline. Buying and selling based upon fear or hype often backfires. Even just missing a couple days in the market could derail some substantial growth. We're going to talk more about that next week. But the best way to do this is to have a disciplined allocation, like we talked about a little bit earlier, a proven strategy of when to adjust. A couple options are bucket strategy or guardrail strategies. Ideally, where we're rebalancing periodically. That way we don't get too out of sync with overall goals and allocations, and reduce the emotional risk of investing. Again, we're going to unpack a little bit more about that next week. But timing the market often could sink a retirement. So please, please, please don't do that. As we conclude, if you're still with me, do me a favor, hit that like button and please consider subscribing. It'll help spread this information to others who might need it. And more importantly, you'll be notified of future episodes. Today, we talked about 5 costly investment mistakes to avoid, even more so as you approach retirement. Now, ideally, your investing should be done in consideration with an overall comprehensive retirement plan, one that considers your retirement aspirations, your goals, your income needs, your timing, and a whole lot more. And I understand how overwhelming and confusing it can be. And the reality is you've never retired before. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them below or send an email to mike@truewealth.show. But a good micro action for this week might be determine which one of those 5 costly mistakes is kind of nearest and dearest to your situation and try to make one little move that will decrease it. If you have too much cash, maybe decrease it a little bit. If you're too concentrated, maybe diversify a little bit more. If your planning horizon is too short, maybe expand a little bit. Figure out which one of those is nearest and dearest to your personal situation and try to take one little step that you could decrease the overall. Remember, when it comes to investing, small moves compounded over time really do make a big difference. Most pre-retirees are just one or two smart investment moves away from having a more confident retirement. And avoiding these pitfalls is a great place to start. Hopefully, this helps you on your path to a prosperous, enjoyable, and purposeful retirement. Till next time, hope you have a great day. God bless you. Thanks again for taking the time to watch this week's episode of the True Wealth Retirement Show. But just a couple more things before you leave. Number one, if you're looking for any help with your retirement planning, or you know anyone who might be looking for some help, I offer a 30-minute, no-cost, no-obligation conversation to anyone, and I'll try to point you in the right direction. Number two, if you're looking for some resources to help plan your retirement, check out planyourchristianretirement.com. And one final note before we wrap up. While I hope this information is helpful and valuable and insightful to you, it's really meant for informational and educational purposes only. Prior to making any decisions or taking any actions, I strongly encourage you to talk to your legal, tax, estate, or financial advisor who's familiar with the unique circumstances of your particular personal situation. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, hope you have a great day. God bless you.